Hi. Just waiting for Niv to get here. Hi. Gabby. Hello, Jen. So we're just waiting for Niv from Manta Trust. And then we'll get him live with me here. Hi. Jen, are you laughing at me? Okay, I don't see him here yet. Hi, Nubia. Hello, Marianne. Yes, you are. There we go.
Here we are.
Hey, how are you?
Rachel, very well, thanks.
Good.
I have to admit, I'm not very good with technology, especially with social media.
Hey, we're doing good. We got you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, thanks for joining us. I know
it's great.
What time is it there?
It's 10 in the evening.
Thanks for joining us.
No worries. 10 in the evening on a Saturday. My little one is sleeping in the other room, so I hope not to wake him up.
Aw. Perfect. Well, how do you want to get started? Do you want to introduce yourself? Would you mind?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So obviously you know me, but some of the people following probably don't, most of them. So my name is Niv. First of all, I apologize for my English, which might be not that great. I'm actually Italian. Well, really complicated life, moved here and there for quite a while. But yeah, so English is not my mother tongue, so apologies if I make some mistakes here and there. But yeah, so my name is Niv, and I'm almost 40 already. And for about the last 10 years of my life, I've been working with the Manta Trust, which is a UK charity dedicated to the conservation of manta mobile rays and their habitats globally. So it's a charity that was established in 2011 by a marine biologist, Guy Stevens, who founded the Manta Trust with the sort of the idea of bringing together all the independent projects and sort of scientists, researchers, conservationists, even videographers that were working independently to further the conservation and understanding of the biology of mantas. And that's how the Manta Trust started, by this idea of bringing together and create a stronger voice rather than smaller individual voices. And
that's great.
I've been involved with the Manta Trust since 2010, basically before the Manta Trust was even funded. Right. And for most of the time I was leading the Manta Trust project in the Maldives, which is the first project that really started the Manta Trust. Right. And so I was based in the Maldives for about for 6 years, leading the project there, living in islands, and then in the last few years, I've actually taken different roles from more science and research focused. I've started actually a PhD studying the reproductive biology of manta rays, and I've been in charge of the development of an ID the Manta platform, which is a platform dedicated we're sort of planning to launch very soon. It's taken a long time, but which will sort of collect and centralize all the photo IDs and that
Wow.
global database the Manta Trust has gathered in the last decade or so.
Wow.
And will be open to the general public, will really foster and that more and more the participation of the general public to citizen science as well. And then on the side, I also manage this Manta expedition, so citizen science trips that we organize, focused on encountering manta rays in places where where there's great chances of encountering them, where also there's need for increased research effort, and that's where sort of the partnership with Nautilus comes in. And we've now been quite a few years that we've run trips together. It's been incredibly successful. Those are also great fundraising trips because they raise really important funds for the trust and allow us to fund projects which won't be possible otherwise. So
right.
It's been great.
Well, we like working with you. I remember, I think the first time I got the pleasure of meeting you was in Italy, like three years ago.
Possibly even 4.
4? Oh my gosh.
I think it was 2016.
Oh, how the time flies.
It does, yeah.
That's great. How do you want it to go with the pictures? Do you want me to show some? How would you like to do it?
I think you can just show some, here and again, when there's maybe questions specifically about something, or when I'm talking, I don't know, about, for example, feeding aggregations or cleaning, then maybe I'll ask you if you don't mind to sort of put a picture showing cleaning behavior, showing feeding behavior. I think that's. I think images often speak louder than words, so just having pretty pictures going in the background, I think.
I have the pictures here, but they're not showing up on Instagram for me right now.
Oh, right. So don't worry about it. I've got a little manta here, and I actually brought my little Manta cuddly toys. They're really cute. So I can use those too. Yeah, they're really cute. So I have 2 of them, and they're actually 2 different ones. So I often use them to show, for example, reproductive behavior, how these animals make. Very handy.
That your mantas are actually they are a real manta, right?
Yeah, they are actually, yes. So one interesting aspect about manta rays is that each one of them has a unique pattern of spots on its belly, just like a fingerprint for a human being. So we've actually made those little guys in exactly looking like mantas that actually exist. Those are Maldivian mantas, both of them. We have to do a Socorro or a Revilla mantas at some point. So they're both reef mantas, and actually I can already show one of the differences between the 2 species, which relates to the spot pattern. Reef mantas have spots often clustered between the gills, or you generally find lots of spots between the gills, while in oceanic mantas you very, very rarely find any spot between the gills, and if you do find, it's generally just sort of one tiny microscopic little spot right there. Otherwise, in oceanic mantas would have their spots all clustered in the pelvic region right here. So this is a reef manta, and this is Bubble, and this is Storm. I've got 2 little ones.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what was it about Mantis that got you started in this? Tell me, what was it?
What? I think the best way to explain it is just get in the water with them. Whenever you get the chance, get in it, just go down and meet one of these animals. And it's just sort of, and the first encounter, and actually every encounter with this animal, is just breathtaking, and it's just so difficult to express in words, especially for someone who's not a mother tongue English. But it's just captivating, so emotionally intense. They are animals that, differently from many others, they really engage with you, and this is what really fascinated me about these animals and encountering for the first time. When you think about, you go to a safari in Africa to see gazelles, to see giraffes, to see lions. Yeah, you do see them, but it's a very passive encounter you have with these animals. You might see them with your binoculars, you might take pretty pictures. They're there, you're here, and there's no engagement, there's no interaction. And with mantas, these encounters are on a total different level, different to any other animals I've ever experienced. Those are animals that really, you can really tell they come and actively, really sort of, they're curious. They come and investigate you. They realize that you are an entity, you're something there, and you're something different than any other being. and they sort of engage with you. You can make eye contact with these animals, and you can see that they're friend of mine as they look into your soul. They really, really do. They look into your soul, into your brain, into your eyes, and I mean, there's something absolutely fascinating, mysteriously fascinating about these animals that really, capture your emotion like no other animals can. And you've had, I mean, did you have a chance have you been in the water with them?
Yeah.
You have. So you know very well what I'm talking about, right?
Been on so let's start at the beginning. Where do you want to start with mantas? Feeding?
At the beginning, it was night.
You tell me where you want to start.
Well, if we're talking mantas, you want me to explain a little bit about basic biology of these animals, what they are? Well, sure. So here's a manta. If you haven't seen one yet, there's one there as well. And although they might not look like, they have this very particular, different, unique shape, they are actually fishes, but fishes that belong to the so-called cartilaginous elasmobranchs, which is the same group of fishes to which sharks also belong to. And you probably already heard about this shark talks, and obviously, I mean, most ocean lovers already are aware of this distinct two groups. Cartilaginous elasmobranchs are much, much older than the bony fishes to which all the other common fishes belong to, from salmon to trouts and so on. And they've been around for about 400 million years, even more than that, actually 450 million years. They've overcame 5 major extinctions that really sort of knocked down most of the life on the planet, but they're still around. And so they're very successful group of animals. Right. Their characteristic is obviously having a cartilaginous skeleton, differently from bony fishes or us. They don't actually have any part of the skeleton made of calcium carbonate, so they're very flexible, and that's why some manta rays can bend their pectoral fins so easily. Sharks have the ability to bend their bodies thanks to the elasticity of cartilage. So they don't have, for example, joints in their body. They don't need to have any. So very light. They also have another interesting difference, which I'm particularly interested in, of course, because it's one of a topic of my research, is the reproduction. So they have actually an internal fertilization, differently from bony fishes, which spawn and eggs and sperm meet in open water. Sharks, rays, so on, they actually copulate, a proper copulation like us humans do, and which also makes often their reproductive behavior very interesting and very fascinating, like that of mantis.
Right.
Manta rays are though much younger than the sort of one of the most recent group of cartilaginous fishes that evolved or appeared on our planet. They're only about 15 million years old, so they're very recent. It's a very recent, relatively recent species that actually evolved from benthic rays, meaning sort of stingrays that generally live on the seabed, feeding on crustaceans and mollusks, and manta rays, mobular rays. They've actually evolved from those rays about 50 million years ago, and they've actually went through a complete change, anatomical change, to adapt to a new lifestyle. So from living on the seabed, they became pelagic animals again, so living in the open water and changing completely their diet from being dwellers looking for crustaceans and mollusks on the sand. Mantas and mobulars became planktivores. Planktivore fishes. So they feed on plankton, almost exclusively on plankton. So in order to do so, their mouth migrated to the front. Typical classic image of a stingray is the little nostrils here, and then the mouth on the ventral side, which looks often like a smile. But that mouth migrated in mantas and mobulars to the very front in order to make it more efficient for them to feed.
Right.
And obviously became very large. I mean, those mouths are huge. I've actually experienced a person being almost swallowed by a manta, obviously by mistake, or the head of it entering the mouth of a manta. It was a mistake, a really funny event. None the manta, none the person got injured, but it was really funny. But yeah, they do have massive mouth, used, of course, to maximize the amount of plankton that they can intake at once. And these little two sort of horns that unfortunately give often the name to the group of devil rays. You may have heard speaking about devil rays. It's just because of those little two projections in front of the head. They're not horns. They're not dangerous, but they're appendixes that allow or help the animal funnel or direct water into the mouth. So they're unique to mantas and mobula rays. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
What else to say? There's lots and lots to say. Feeding wise, yeah, one of the fascinating aspects about these animals is their feeding. They actually adopt different feeding strategies depending on the type found in the water, depend on how concentrated plankton is in the water, and depending also on how many animals are around. They may decide to kind of cooperate with other individuals to feed more efficiently. So you have those, for example, piggyback feeding is a very cute way of feed, where the animals sort of ride one another in this manner. So often be a sort of a smaller individual following a larger one, and they sort of keep on swimming this way with one individual riding the second. And by doing so, the manta found behind the first one is basically taking advantage of the flat body of the manta in front that direct and pushes all the plankton into the mouth of the following animal. Then you have those amazing sort of chain feeding, which is sort of similar to piggyback, but just imagine 15, 20 individuals, one behind the other one, swimming in a chain, just like bikers, taking advantage of the animal in front that will sort of break the water for them. Then you have those amazing mass feeding events known also as cyclone feeding, where 50 or so, or sometimes more individuals start swimming in a cyclonic formation, and by doing so, they actually generate a current of its own, centripetal current that sucks in plankton-rich water to the center of the cyclone, replenishing the water with food, so that the animal doesn't have to go and look for it, but the food comes to them. And I've found myself many times in the middle of a manta cyclone feeding event, and the strength, the power of the current that they can generate is really impressive. I mean, I found myself being sucked in the cyclone, and I have to struggle in order to keep on the edge of it, and not be sort of really sucked in. I won't get eaten, of course, but I just found myself in the middle of a feeding frenzy. Imagine each one of these animals. If you're talking reef mantas, they're between 300 up to 700 kilos each. So put together 50 or 60 of them swimming in a cyclonic formation, and you can imagine the amount of power they can generate. And if you're talking oceanic mantas, those animals can reach a weight of 2,000 kilos. Really, really heavy. It's sort of a car, the weight of a car.
We have a question. How much do they eat?
Exactly how much, it's not really known, but we suspect they eat somewhere between 1 and 5 kilos of plankton a day. And because plankton is also not equally distributed, and it's not a food source that can be found regularly and constantly, the concentration fluctuates a lot from season to season, depending on regions as well. So these animals probably take advantage of ephemeral presence of high density of plankton. So they might feed a lot of ton within a short period of time, and then might not feed for a few days if food is then not available, and they will just spend that time looking for another highly concentrated food source. So they might, within a few hours, they might be able to gorge 10 kilos of plankton, and then just because, as I said, plankton is so not equally distributed, that whenever there is enough or there is a high density of it, then the animal will really try and maximize it and feed as much as possible. So sometimes we see those mantas with really fat bellies. We often think they might be pregnant, but actually what they are is just really, really well fed.
Gotcha. We have another question. Why is it so rare at Socorro to see mantas feeding?
Well, Socorro or Revellagigedos, if you want to be precise, correct. It's a mystery. I mean, and we know much less about oceanic mantas than we know about reef mantas, because those are more sort of pelagic species that spend most of its time offshore, probably also a little bit greater depth compared to the reef species. And the truth is that we don't really know for sure what these animals, or for what are these animals using places like the Socorro Islands.
Right.
They aggregate and see around seamounts, just like Socorro Islands, although they come out of the water, but they are considered like seamounts, and those are places that aggregate in general pelagic life. And we know that food also, productivity obviously increases whenever there is a seamount, because just upwelling currents bring up nutrients to the surface, and kickstart productivity. So there's much more phytoplankton, zooplankton, so more food for these animals. But if they're using that area to feed and where they're feeding exactly, we don't really know. I mean, we have some indication that tell us that they do spend quite some time feeding also in the area, but more sort of at a depth to which divers don't generally reach. So one of the projects that was done using critter cams to be able to see what the animal is doing, and was actually done in Socorro Islands. So a few cameras were deployed on the head of a manta ray by using suction cups, so without it was not an intrusive tagging methodology.
That's so cool.
But yeah, it was really amazing. We've done the same also in the Maldives. I was there, so I've seen it myself, and I've done it myself. It was really fascinating, and that was something really novel that allowed us to see from the eye of the animal, see exactly what they're doing when they're doing it, and which depth as well. And so some of the results that we've got from those tags showed us that they often utilize the thermocline as a feeding area. So thermocline is often an area where plankton tends to concentrate. So the thermocline, which is around 70 meters, it's where some of the feeding behavior was observed on critter cam. So that's why it's probably below the depth that we generally dive in Socorro. But there is certainly some feeding happening there. It might also be used as sort of socializing site. But the truth is that, again, we don't really know for sure what those areas are for.
Did you find anything else interesting on the critter cams that you had, or?
There was a lot of on the oceanic mantas. Not so much. Besides, those feeding and the use of the vertical column of water. Again, they didn't really dive as deep as we thought. They were staying within the surface and sort of 70 meters on average. We did find some really cool stuff on reef mantas, mainly because there were more individuals around. So we've seen a lot of courtship behavior. We've done the critter cam deployments during the mating season in the Maldives. That's the place where we did it on reef mantas. And so we actually observed a lot of courtship behavior, mating trains happening also at depth we didn't think that would happen. So below 50 meters, we're still males following females. We've had manta following mobular rays, so sort of a cross-species interaction, which was really, really interesting. Manta clearly following a group of mobular rays.
Really?
Spine-tailed mobulus, which are actually quite rare in the Maldives. It was just amazing to see how social these animals are, which was something also quite surprising.
Wow, that's really, really cool. We have another question. Is there a difference in size between oceanic and reef mantas?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. That's one of the ways you can tell them apart, the size. So oceanic mantas grow up to 7 meters in wingspan. And again, Socorro hosts some of the largest rays in the world, actually, while reef mantas grow to to a maximum of 4.5, which maybe just over 4.5 meters in wingspan. So yeah, oceanics are much, much larger. Of course, you will find smaller oceanic mantas when they're sort of newly born or juvenile, but yeah, they do grow much larger.
What's the lifespan of mantas?
So it's minimum certainly 40, 45 years. So they're very, very long-lived animals. Very, very, they live long time. And we know that, again, thanks to photo IDs, so photographs of animals that we've collected through the years, also through submissions from general public. We have a photograph of a manta that was sighted. It was published on a magazine in 1986, I think, or so. And then we kept on seeing in the Maldives until 2012. And the photo of that animal in 1986 was of a mature female. So we know that she was already at least 15 years old, because they mature very, very late in their life. Females around 15 and males around 10 years of age. Similar probably for oceanic mantas. And so by just doing a very simple calculation, we know that individual was at least 40 or so years old. And in Australia, they actually have the record of the oldest manta observed or on record, on database. And she's around 45 years of age as well. So yeah, they'd be very, very long, but they reach sexual maturity very late in their life, and they only reproduce once every 2 to 7 years, depending on region and species. So they have a very slow growth rate, very low fecundity, low reproductive rate. So because of those characteristics, they are also very fragile species. Very slow to recover from a state of depletion, for example, in case of.
Do you notice any, or do you know of any behavioral differences between juvenile mantas and do they behave any differently, or?
Yeah, definitely they do. Juveniles are sometimes they really behave like little children. It's amazing. I shouldn't speak about animals in an anthropomorphic way, but they really do behave like little children. They're very curious. They have these little pups that really come up to you very close, and they swim all around you. They sometimes flip belly up, which is a typical sort of inquisitive behaviors. If you have a manta come suddenly flipping upside down and showing you her belly or his belly, it's trying to show you how big it is, and also at the same time kind of trying to gauge what you are. So it's a very typical curious and inquisitive behavior, and juveniles do that a lot. They also struggle learning feeding behaviors, for example. So you have these little mantas that don't really know how to feed efficiently, for example. Another one of a fascinating feeding behavior that you can see mantas doing are those somersaults, where mantas sort of swim fat like that. And they just keep on somersaulting in the water when plankton is concentrated. And adults know to do that very well, but then you have those little guys trying to copy those adults, and they do half a petal, and then they don't know how to end it. So yeah, there's a clear distinction in behavior between adults and juveniles, where the adults are much more experienced clearly than the little guys. And there's also segregation. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
They also segregate. So you have regional sites where you find more individuals, more adults, and there's other sites where it's mainly juvenile. So adult individuals will venture more into deep waters where there's higher chances of encountering predators, but also higher chances of finding a highly concentrated food source. While the little ones, juveniles, tend to stay in more shallow waters, protected coastal areas, where there's again less chances of becoming breakfast for someone.
Right. Jen is asking, how big are the newborns?
Generally for British mantas, about 1.5 meter in wingspan. So You will never see a baby manta like that. That's only a cuddly toy. It's not an actual size. They actually about my arm span. So they are born already really big. And for oceanic mantas, we have 1.9 meters to 2 meters in wingspan. So they're really, really, really big at birth. That's why they only give birth to one individual at a time. It's very, very rare that they give birth to two at once. And 99.9% of the time, it's just one pup, because it does require a lot of energy in order to bring to full development and a fetus that is 2 meters in wingspan. And it does take 12.5 months. It's a very, very long gestation. Right. And again, they're very big at birth, and that's their natural defense as well, their size. They don't have any other way of defending themselves other than size. They're not dangerous. They don't have any poisonous dart like stingrays do. So yeah, they're only naturally defensive their size. And because they're born so big, there's very few predators that can successfully prey on mantas, and that's why they also have a very, very low mortality rate.
Is it known where they give birth?
No, well, yes and no. So again, here I have to speak differently for the two species. So reef mantas, oceanic mantas, again, we know much more about reef mantas than we know about oceanics. That's the fascinating thing about oceanic mantas, that there's so much still to learn about these guys. They're so much more difficult to study because, again, they inhabit offshore habitats compared to the reef ones. But for reef mantas, we know that there's sort of, again, coastal lagoons in some areas around the world. We have data showing high density of juvenile individuals, pups, newborns, and those are clear indication of possible pupping grounds. So one curious fact is that a birth of a manta has never been observed in the wild. So we don't know for sure where they go to give birth, but we have facts and results that kind of point us toward that direction. So we know that some shallow lagoons, protected lagoons in some areas, bays in Indonesia, there's places where there's high concentration of juvenile and pups.
Wow.
Compared to others. So those are probably areas where they come to give birth. And when it comes to the oceanics of Mexico, the truth is that we have no idea of where they're giving birth. There's very, very few pregnant individuals also sighted around the Revillagigedos. So few pregnant females, certainly, or unlikely that Socorro is a nursery or a region used as a pupping ground. So it certainly has other functions, clearly very important. The feeding, most likely important as a feeding ground, socializing area. These animals are clearly aggregating at those seamounts and socializing in there.
Wow. Do you do any tracking of any mantas or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have researchers that are trained to hold on to the tail of a manta and just follow them. Just kidding.
Just keep going.
We do use satellite and acoustic tagging to track movements of these animals, especially when it comes to oceanic mantas. That's sort of one of the best and only ways to really understand their home range and their migratory patterns, or where they're actually going to and where they're coming from, is using satellite tags. So quite a large number of individuals have been tagged in Socorro, for example. And what was in one of the interesting findings of tagging is that those individuals that were originally thought, oceanic mantas, were originally thought to be ocean wanderers, so animals that cross entire ocean basins. They're actually much more, they have a much smaller home range than we originally thought. So most of the mantas that we see in the Revillagigedos in Socorro are actually mantas that seem to spend pretty much their entire life or a long time in Socorro. They don't really move much. There's not much connectivity between different populations, even comparing Socorro mantas to the Bahia de Banderas, for example, mantas sighted on the coastal Mexico.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was one of really, really interesting finding by a study published by a Manta Trust director, one of the directors, Josh Stewart, name you maybe heard of. So he's done a lot of tagging in the area in Mexico and in Socorro as well. So that was really interesting.
Yeah. I thought they would likely have a set kind of migration pattern that they kind of followed, but it's interesting that they hang around there.
Yeah, seem to do. Yeah. Well, many individuals are only sighted once and then not sighted for a number of years, but that's still, and that was the reason behind the theory that they're probably sort of, wandering off who knows where. But actually, they don't seem to. They probably just, again, staying a little bit further offshore, a little bit greater depth where food is available, and just hanging around there rather than crossing the entire oceans.
Wow. Okay. We have a couple more questions here. Are there other areas with more pregnant oceanic mantas?
Yes, actually. So, for example, in Ecuador, there's an area where on the coastal side of Ecuador, there's a particular site near an island where there's a large number of oceanic mantas coming through, and many of them are actually pregnant females, big pregnant females. So this is sort of a new, relatively, well, not so new discovery, but it's a population of mantas we don't really know yet much about. But those facts indicate that might be an area quite critical for reproduction and maybe pupping as well. So again, we're in coastal environment, and it's again most likely that those protected areas act as nursery or pupping grounds for these animals.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Now, it's unlikely that it would be the same animals that visit Socorro, for example. Right. So, as I just said, those populations are quite distinct and separated. There's not much overlapping. So that still leaves the question of where are the mantas of Socorro giving birth? Where are they going to give birth? And finding those sites is critical because pupping grounds are crucial then to be protected and preserved, and making sure they're not habitats are not they're well preserved.
Yeah, definitely. Does the mama keep close to the pups to teach them, or do they just birth and leave them alone?
Yeah, sorry, they're not romantic, not poetic animals. So there is no parental caring in any elasmobranch species, any cartilaginous elasmobranch. So no sharks, no rays. In none of these species, you'll have the mother sticking, or the little one sticking with the mums. So they're independent at the moment they're born. Again, they also utilize different habitats. Juveniles, they will remain in coastal environments, and the adults will bugger off in more pelagic and offshore habitats. And so their behaviors are presumably learned by following other individuals. So juveniles will first spend the first years, again, we're now talking about reef mantas, but it's likely that it's going to be similar for oceanics as well. So the juveniles will spend a number of years in a very, very small area, sort of learning feeding behaviors, and then slowly starting to venturing off into more dangerous area where also food is more available, and possibly most likely following and copying mature individuals that they find on their exploratory first adventures. And that's how they kind of learn migratory routes, for example. That's why they learn sites used as cleaning stations. That's where they learn where they are likely to find high concentration of food and when. So yeah, again, they're very social animals. They do spend a lot of time with each other.
Right. Mantas are incredibly smart. That's for sure.
It's another fascinating aspect about these animals, their brain. The brain has been studied in quite high detail by a scientist called Xilla Ari. And one of the fascinating aspect about the brain is that it's been recognized that the brain of a manta is the largest in the brain to body mass ratio is the highest in mantas of any other fish. So we can, in brackets, say that they are the most intelligent fishes on our planet. And also a particular region of the brain was found to be highly developed in mantas, and it's the same region of the brain that is found developed in animals with very complex social lives, just like humans and other primates, or cetaceans as well. So another indication of how social these animals are, and how they're capable of developing complex social behaviors and social structures maybe as well.
Well, they have, and the self-recognition.
Right, yeah.
That was still a
It's a
two.
speculate. I mean, yeah, it's it was very difficult to confirm that empirically. It's very difficult to study. Sort of self-awareness in an animal like a manta ray. But there's a few certainly study that indicates the possibility of manta rays being among the very, very small group of animals on our planet capable of self-awareness, so basically recognizing themselves in a mirror and knowing, having that sense of personality, and also distinguishing people. So there's this very fascinating anecdote that I've been told by Guy Stevens, again, the founder of the Manta Trust, and he told me the story of one of his first encounters with mantas in the Maldives, where he found himself on a dive site with another group of 15 divers, and a group of feeding mantas, 15 or so feeding mantas, and one of them was entangled in a fishing line. So he immediately tried to approach the animal and managed to free the manta from the fishing line that was wrapped around its body. And that's very common. Mantas seeking help of divers, it's relatively common. It's another indication of how smart these animals are. But the most fascinating thing about this encounter is that the next day, then he goes back to the same site, and again there's about 15 or 20 mantas feeding, and he's there with another 10 divers, and he noticed, because mantas have unique spot pattern, he recognized the manta that he freed the day before. And at some point, that manta stopped feeding and swam directly above his head and started circling right above his head. And out of 15 or so divers, that manta somehow did that manta recognize that he was her savior, or was it just by chance that she decided to go and hover on his head? Well, we won't never be able to answer that question, but certainly the chances of going right at him out of 15 divers raises makes it think. And there's something really special about that. Yeah.
Definitely. Wow, that's incredible. What are their biggest predators?
Larger sharks and large cetaceans. So it would be tiger sharks. It would be great whites in few areas where their habitats overlap, and orcas as well, and false killer whales. So it would be mainly those ones. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess leading into our next question, do people fish them illegally?
Unfortunately, they do, and unfortunately, not only illegally, but sadly, in some areas also legally. In some areas, mantas are still, although they have some level of international protection, that many countries have not put in place any national law to protect these animals, and they are still fished legally. The trade then is then illegal, but the harming and the fishing of these mantas in some areas is still allowed. So again, it's the number of countries where that happens is very quickly dropping, and more and more countries are really putting in place regulations to protect these animals, including Peru, Mexico, we're talking Americas, Indonesia, Thailand, Maldives, and so on. So many countries have put in place regulations to protect these animals, but they're still unfortunately fished in some others, mainly because of their gill breakers. The gill filaments that the animal uses to filter the plankton out of the water. is used in Asian medicine and is believed to be able to purify your blood and to sometimes cure certain diseases. In some occasions, also curing cancer. But this legend is based on the fact that the gills of a manta filter or purify the water by filtering the plankton out of it. So by consuming them, they believe they can filter and purify our own body as well. Obviously, nothing more wrong than that. We've actually there's studies that have proven that actually gill plates concentrate heavy metals, for example, being filtering devices. They filter and then they obviously concentrate also toxic substances. So yeah, there's been a number of campaigns that have been launched to sort of reduce the demand for the gill in the Asian market with good success. So now in the last few years, the demand for the gill plates has actually started to drop rather than keep increasing. So that's good news.
Yeah, definitely.
But again, there's still, unfortunately, in some areas, especially when tourism is not well developed, fishing of these animals might still be more profitable for populations that rely, coastal populations that live in fishing, and they still have to feed a number of mouths at home.
Right. How can we help stop this?
Well, first of all, learn about it. Obviously, this is the starting point, and learning that something is happening. It's crucial in order to act to avoid it. So if we don't know that this is happening, how can we do something about it?
Right.
So learn more about it, inform yourself, spread the word as well. So the more people are aware of it, the stronger the voice is to fight against it.
Right.
And there's obviously then a number of ways that you can sort of help organizations such as the Manta Trust that are sort of dedicated their entire work further the conservation of animals. So it's by sharing providing data for our research, which is then obviously research and science is what is used as a backup or as a it's used to justify conservation or protective measurements for these animals.
Right.
So, knowing how slow they reproduce, how small the populations are strong arguments require then protective measures. So learning more and more about these animals is fundamental. So if you, for example, pictures at home of a belly of a manta, whatever has been taken, you can share that with the Manta Trust. On the Manta Trust website, we have a section called ID the Manta, where you can just upload your image. We'll obviously identify the animal. I will send you back information about the animal you've seen, you've encountered, and that obviously becomes it's a little piece of a jigsaw puzzle that help us getting a better picture of the life of this animal. That's another small way that you can help. Again, keeping informed. We have lots of very active social media channels. Manta Trust is very, very active. So just keep informed about what is happening and what you can do. You can there's a number of ways you can also help raising funds, for example. Of course, donations are a basic thing, but there's also other ways, such as becoming part of our exclusive cyclone group. So we've launched a sort of community called the Cyclone, which gives a behind-the-scene eye to the members of the group, interviews and all the behind-the-scenes of the Manta Trust, access to additional material, discounts as well, for example, on merchandise. And that helps, obviously, the charity to cover our running costs, for example, especially during times such as these where lots of charities are really, really struggling to keep their head out of the water. It's really important to have flow of funds in order to stay alive and be able to continue doing the work that we do. Another way. Yes, of course. I was getting there. Of course, if you want to do something more active, a great way to help is participating in a citizen science trip. So we do organize citizen science expeditions where one of the Manta Trust scientists will be on board and will be there also teaching and helping participants actively getting involved, collecting data to help our research. So on these trips, first of all, you'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot more about mantas that you can learn on this short Instagram live. You'll be in close contact with a Manta Trust scientist for a whole trip, and you'll actually be able to actively collect data for us. So we'll teach you, for example, how to properly collect photo ID of an animal and how to analyze the data that you collected yourself. So we're piling up photos of mantas, and we always need help to even just identify the animals or just analyzing that all the photographs that have been collected. So on these trips, participants will be able to help doing that. So we run daily presentations, workshops where you can again learn more ways of helping us, helping and getting involved. And of course, on this another critical aspect of this trip is that those are also fundraising trips. So by taking part of these trips, you know that part of what you're actually paying goes directly to the Manta Trust research and conservation effort.
That's great. We have a question. Just a heads up too, we've got just under 10 minutes left. So if you do have any questions, please try and get them in sooner rather than later so we can try and get them answered for you. But Jesse said, what do you estimate the world population to be? Can you give some info about the different areas and their population size?
So we do have clearer numbers for some areas than others, of course. Again, when we're talking reef mantas, we have much more clearer pictures. So if you want word number, global number of mantas, we're probably talking a few 100,000 individuals. We don't know exactly because, again, especially for oceanic mantas, the residing rate is very low, so that the exact number of population it's more difficult to estimate than for reefs. But certainly, we're not talking more than a few 100,000 individuals, and that's why even a fishery which is not as intense as the one, for example, that we're all aware on sharks, but can still have very quick and dramatic effect on manta rays. You can really understand if you're fishing 10,000 individuals a year of a population of 100,000, just a few years, and you're driving that species to extinction. Well, obviously, we're talking shark. We're talking billions of sharks on our planet. That doesn't mean that those are. It's justifiable to fish sharks, but what I'm just trying to say is that even though the fishery for mantas is not as intense, in ratio to the number of animals present on our planet, it is just as dramatic.
Right.
Then, as for different regions, so for example, obviously interesting here to talk about Socorro, the database that is held by the Pacific Manta Research Group, which is the affiliated project, an affiliated project of the Manta Trust, which leads the research in the Socorro archipelago. At the moment stands to 900 individuals identified, of which 40% have been resighted. So the population is likely to be possibly a few thousand, unlikely more than that. So again, we're not talking huge numbers of animals. Maldives has the largest known sort of identified population of mantas, just also because our research effort there is much more important. So we have a population of about 5,000 individuals. Again, Ecuador, we're over 1,500 or so individuals identified. So it is actually the largest population of oceanic mantas identified. Now, that doesn't mean it's the largest one, but currently identified.
Wow.
So yeah, in terms of oceanic mantas, those populations are in the few thousand individuals, and for reef mantas, few thousand, 5,000 in the Maldives. Indonesia has again one of the largest, second largest population of mantas, when we're talking reef, again, there's about just over 2,000 individuals identified there. While very sort of much smaller populations when we get into areas like Fiji, French Polynesia, Hawaii, when we generally few hundred individuals in population or identified population, so much smaller populations.
Yeah. We have a question and only a few minutes here, but are there recent studies about migration in Mexico, in particular the Revillagigedos and along the Mexican coast?
Yeah, sure. There has been, so that's what I was I quoted before when I mentioned how we know that oceanic mantas are more resident than was originally thought. It's actually based on research done in Revillagigedos and coastal Mexico by de Bandera, where individuals were tagged and are still tagged today to sort of look at how connected the populations are. And the result was, although there is some movement, but the movement is very, very insignificant to the population size. So although there is some connection, those populations are clearly distinct population with some sort of flow between the two.
Wow.
Obviously, this research is still underway, still ongoing research. And of the ID'd animals, of those 900 identified animals in Socorro, only 11 has been also sighted on the coast of Mexico. So very, very few. Again, that shows how there's very limited connection between the two populations.
Right. Wow. Well, thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for inviting me. And I could say so much more, and I'm sure I sort of forgot to say a lot about about mantas, about what you can do to help, and how special they are. If you want to know more, I would say the best is to join. We have coming a few expeditions on the Nautilus Explorer to Socorro, which will be accompanied by 1 or 2 Manta Trust scientists. So you'll have a whole week to learn, ton more about mantas and directly from world experts, and while at the same time helping protecting them. So that's a great way to engage with us.
Definitely. I'm probably going to be bugging you to do this again with me. So
happy to. Sure, I'll be happy to.
We'll talk about that after, and hopefully for that one I'll get your pictures. Oh yeah, Jen, yes, you do. You can just tell everyone's saying thank you. That was awesome. I learned.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for for joining, for tuning in, for listening. And sorry for the lack of images. I hope you appreciated a little tour here.
Can you buy those on your website?
Not yet.
Okay.
We've just finished the current stock, but we are getting a new stock of mantas made, and we'll definitely have to make a Socorro one.
Yeah, because you always sell them at any shows you're at when we're allowed to have shows again, I guess.
Right. Hopefully soon. I mean, we're planning to be in Friedrichshafen.
Okay. In September.
In September, planning to be there, and we should also be in Paris as well, and Eudi in Bologna, which has been postponed to November.
Oh,
so I don't know if I don't know if I'll see you at any of those.
We'll see. You're not going to do boat show though.
I'm most likely not, because it's at the same time as the Frankfurt Interdive,
right.
And for me it's just more next door. I live in Frankfurt, so
that's perfect. Great. All right. Well, thanks again. I'm about to get cut off here, so thank you so much, and we'll try and get you back.
Thank you, Rachel. Sure, happy to come back whenever you want. Thanks everyone. Cheers.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.